at World Pork Expo with Jesus Acosta with Novus, and we're here to talk about your new product.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me here. Well, the first thing I wanted to say is new to the US, but we have had this product for a while in Europe. Um, so we knew since we launched the product, we knew we have good data on this product. Even a few years ago, I mean, before they banned zinc oxide, and then with the zinc oxide ban, um, this product just took off mostly in Spain and in France, in Italy, and we have had a product like for more than 10 years over there. We always wanted to have the product here in the US, but one of the ingredients of the product was not authorized, and then it finally got released. So it's authorized now, and so we brought the product here. It was called in Europe Provinia, or it is because we still have it there.
Yep.
But then here we couldn't use Provinia, so we needed a new name. So we call it Novus PV as protected benzoic. So this product is basically benzoic acid. Benzoic acid has been used in our industry throughout. We know it's a good product. It's a good organic acid. Uh, However, what we ended up doing with this good product is to protect it with a fat matrix that basically gets released in the intestine instead of acidifying the stomach, which is mostly the mode of action of free organic acids. We release this acid in the intestine. This makes a kind of a different mode of action. And we see that that differential in mode of action makes a very interesting product because it can act differently than the traditional way to add organic acids. In Europe, we have a really good record there, but we needed to prove that that works in here in the US under the conditions of the US. So, and also because we use zinc oxide here. So the first task that we needed to, the answer that we needed to have is that if it works here under high zinc oxide. We run two studies so far, one commercial, one mode of action. In the commercial one, we got a feed conversion response. We got a weight response, and we had in the mode of action an E. coli challenge. And actually, PV was really good. It resembles uh, towards the non-challenge group. And we analyze inflammation, cytokines. We analyze diarrhea, and it reduced diarrhea. And the profile of cytokines, anti-inflammatory and inflammatory was resembling again the non-challenge group. So we are happy that we got the product to work also under U.S. conditions. Obviously, we need more data. I am a research scientist. I always need more.
You need more data.
I need more data.
You're talking to the research person, right?
Right. So you need more. So we are now working on application. So, is it better to do it the first 21 days throughout the nursery with this other organic acid? It works well, or combinations of things. So that's the next questions are more on that side.
Well, I don't know if you remember, but I did some acid blends with Vivo Vital when I was at DSM and Innovation and looking at that zero zinc model, and we presented the first zero zinc summit over in Copenhagen. But obviously, when we're looking at an unprotected benzoic acid, we're looking at that 0.5% level. Are you able to get lower and I guess then more cost effective with the coated and protected?
Yes, a really good question. So I know, with free benzoic, you are in around 10 pounds or 5 kilos per ton. With our protected benzoic, we lower that inclusion because it is protected. We lower that inclusion to 5 pounds or 2.5 kilograms per ton. So that give us lower inclusion, less space. Again, I think the thing with the organic acids, and it's a really good question to have, is I think they are complementary because one is protected, one is free, and they have complementary modes of action. So you can add both at the same time as well. About cost, I think we are competitive in cost. I am the research guy, so you need to ask.
The guys who are selling it, right?
The guys that sell it, but we are pretty competitive because of that reduction. Yeah.
So obviously it's really focused on nursery pigs, but this product to me would also have some value possibly in lactating sows. Have you guys looked at all of that in Europe?
Some of that, yes, but like you said, the major focus has been the nursery pig. We know that because of the mode of action of this product, we can certainly have effects in the sow and in the growing finishing animal. We are actively actually working on those areas as well. But like I said, the focus has been the nursery animal, and that's why we have the bulk of data and the more reliable information right now. But for sure, that's something that we are considering and we are building.
Well, I'm really excited because I mean, if we think of it's protected, we get it to that hind gut, we're gonna have the opportunity to lower ammonia and nitrogen excretion by working in the hind gut, even in a larger animal potentially.
It might actually in the last E. coli challenge, and this is a little bit different, but it speaks to a similar effect. We modulate the microbiome to more butyrate producing bacteria. So that shifting is true. And since it doesn't get released like a capsule, like it get released in one section of the intestine, everything. No, it gets released constantly because it's a matrix. So it gets released constantly during in the lower gut, in the upper gut, and then the lower gut. So we have effects throughout. Yes, that becomes important right now. I think in Europe is one of the things we are looking at. Yes, for sure.
Now, have you just looked at E. coli, or have you also looked at the salmonella aspects control?
Yes, we have. We have one trial that shows that reduction is not a challenge, but we have a nursery trial that shows reduction in E. coli and increase in lactobacilli, and we look at the ratio between the two, and actually the shift is in favor of the lactobacilli. In the last E. coli challenge, we observed that the butyric acid was negatively correlated. So the more butyric acid producing bacteria, there was correlated negatively with the E. coli counts. Which so it was not directly to the E. coli, but it was more in favor of the butyric acid producing bacteria.
Well, great. Well, thank you for talking a little bit more about PV for the U.S. market. And what was the name in the European market?
Provinia. That's
Provinia.
the name. Yeah.
Okay.
So very excited. It's a product that I like. It's a product that is very consistent, which is a feature that is hard to have in this space. I really like to work with this product, but there are still a lot of questions to answer. In my view, we need to get deeper. So I'm here to keep working on it and understand why the differences across trials and all that.
I already see some advantages of synergistics to your other acid products that you have on the market. So
yes, that's exactly what we are looking, and it's not easy to find. These interactions and synergistic effects are rare, but it is for sure something that we need to understand and pursue, because if you have a synergistic effect, that's kind of the
ideal solution.
The best solution, exactly, and the best for the producer. So yeah, we are here to understand, right, how the products work, and I am certainly interested in that in my position.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, we are live at World Pork Expo with Dr. Tommy Shipp with Feedworks. Welcome, Tommy.
Thank you,
so
ma'am.
Good to see you again.
Same here. Good to see you too.
We were just catching up on how many years ago it was that we met, and I was telling Mike before the event that you were very inspiring to me early in my career treated me with kindness, and I really appreciate
Well,
that. And watching you through your career and my career now, it's been 15 years.
Yeah, it's been a long time. But yeah, like I said, that was one thing that, and I still like to do it, is like with young nutrition. And I guess it's because of the way I was treated when I first come into the industry. A gentleman that was, he wasn't an employee, he was a consultant at Ducoa when I first started there, was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Fred Madsen. And Fred, you know Fred,
yeah,
but probably one of the most intelligent people I've ever run across. But he was very approachable. You could talk to him about anything, and he wanted to help. And I just kind of learned some good habits from him that way. So, and I even did that at Smithfield as young nutritionists come in. I always told them I would dig the ditches. You just stay between the ditches until you get enough comfort that now you can play outside the ditches. So it was always that was always just a way that I always like to be with people. And it was one of those, because you never know, your careers, or this is a small industry, and you never know where people are going to end up 10 or 15 years down the road.
I know. And because of you and others, I do the same thing. I've made it part of the process of interviewing and having videos is to get our knowledge, get our expertise out there to share with the next generation of nutritionists.
Yeah.
But today we're here to talk about the new products from Feedworks and the monogastrics, and that is eLife. And we're talking around antioxidant stress.
Yep.
Can we start out with what you've seen as a production nutritionist with oxidative stress and how that hinders performance, mortality, welfare, and things in the animal? Yeah,
I mean, like I said, in my days in working with, starting with working with Smithfield, even down in Mexico, where we had a group, and this was a group that was in the desert part of Mexico, south of Tucson, and believe it or not, you can raise pigs there, but it's a challenge. And heat stress was always a challenge. And one of the ways we worked around that is, luckily, fat was very cheap down there. So, I mean, if I could put 5-6% fat in there, I'd do that just to try to, basically make a cooler diet, so to speak. And that seemed to help. And we actually did that in North Carolina. We actually did it in the Midwest. But as we know, in the last couple of 3 years, fat's gotten where the price of it is, been a little prohibitive as far as running real high levels. And it was one of those things on the East Coast. We still ran higher levels, but I always used a rule of thumb that if fat was more than 3.5 times the price of corn, you probably need to start thinking about sliding it out. Far as the benefits you get, it was going to cost you more for that improvement in feed conversion. And about 3.5 times was that typical cost, but that's not taking into account other things such as, are you tight on space, this type of thing. So like at Smithfield, we actually would run a little higher, maybe not 6% or 5% like we had in the past, but we would run lower levels. But we still ran some, because that was one thing that we always try to do, is try to maintain growth in a hot, humid North Carolina summer. In the Midwest, we didn't, but kind of where I'm getting to with the eLife product is one of the things that we started looking at when I left Smithfield and started doing some consulting work with Feedworks. One of the new products that they wanted me to do some technical consulting on was this product called eLife, which is just a combination of polyphenols, and it's produced in Belgium by a company called Impex Traco. And basically, far as the polyphenols that are in the product, it mimics kind of what you call a Mediterranean diet. So, I mean, it's going to have extracts from grapes and olives and avocados and tomatoes and all that kind of stuff. And the nice thing is there's about 20 to 25 different polyphenols in the product, and there's several products out there that have some grapeseed extract, maybe some other polyphenols as well. So polyphenols in their use has not been necessarily a new thing, but because they were looking at it, trying to, lower heat stress like during the summer, far as like with sows, far as, breed backs, all this, your typical heat stress type issues. Well, one of the things that I started looking at when I was looking at eLife and how to position it was basically, well, as a production nutritionist, one thing I've always done is I've tried to pay for, if I got a new product, is there a way for me to pay for it? And a good example would be, of course, phytase, you get phosphorus, but you may also get some energy release. So, or, if you really want to split hairs, you might get a little bit of improvement in protein digestibility or something like that. Whatever that is that you want to use, or matrix that you want to use, is there a way I can actually pay for this ingredient? Well, one of the things that I was thinking of with eLife, and like I said, it's not an original thought, other people have come up with this, was, of course, we know vitamin E50 has gotten real expensive in diets. And is there a way to, basically partially replace part of that vitamin E with polyphenols, because a good part of the vitamin E that's fed gets oxidized. It's used as an antioxidant, because if you ask a lot of people what vitamin E is in the body, they say it's an antioxidant. Well, it's actually more than that. Of course, we know it has a vitamin component, and polyphenols obviously will not take the place of that. But there's a certain proportion of that 30 IUs per pound or 40 or whatever of vitamin E that you feed that's going to be oxidized. Now, how much that is, a former colleague of mine and myself, we just kind of did a rule of thumb of 50%. That may be 25% high or low. I don't know, but I said, well, that's probably not a bad number. So in other words, if you feed 30, you're probably only getting about 15 of vitamin E. So what I was talking about doing is if you're feeding a level higher than either NRC or whatever level that your genetic company recommends, say it's 30 IUs and you're feeding 40, you could easily replace that 10 overage with eLife. And depending on how you formulate it in, you can actually do it at worst the same cost and get a higher percentage of antioxidant activity in the form of vitamin E equivalents. So anyway, that was kind of one of the products I wanted to talk about is that. And like I said, we've used it. It's been very well accepted or implemented in a lot of dairies. A lot of dairies that Feedworks works with. Been successful there. We're in the process of getting it started with one pretty good size group of sows. So basically, that's going to be kind of a testing period, because I mean, like I said, most people if you start saying replace vitamin E. I'm always careful with that. It's not, you're not replacing the vitamin E, you're just replacing the antioxidant properties. So, in other words, if you go from 40 to 30, you still will meet the spec for that genetic company, because NRC is 20 on sows. So, and some people say, well, maybe you can go down to 20, and you probably could, but the NRC data is very old.
I was going to say, no.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So usually what I try to do is I try to, like if, like a lot of the sows I fed were PIC, so I would just follow PIC's recommendations. And, whatever I'm talking about is usually where I tried to either, those saying is meet or exceed. So I would either meet or exceed the genetic company recommendations. And, of course, a lot of their recommendations were determined by, nutritionists, what they were feeding. But I mean, some of the stuff was based on research as well. But anyway.
Well, I was going to say, it's unfortunate, Dr. Mahan is still not here doing a lot of the original requirement on vitamin E. Mm-hmm. And, it would have been cool to see him take it a little further to truly understand that proportion.
Yeah, because I actually worked with him when I was at ADM on natural vitamin E.
Yep.
And because, you remember back when you probably took your first nutrition course like I did, and you got to the vitamin E part of nutrition, your nutrition book, it always said required for reproduction in rats. And if it talked about natural, it said 1.36 times the amount. And I'll tell you, based on some of the work that Dr. Mahan did, and this is going back 20 years ago now, almost, when I was at ADM, but 1.36 was way too low. And some people use 1.5 now, but there was some tissues that was well over twice the level, like brain and lung. I remember the brain and the lung were over 2, but I've always used, depending on cost, but 1.5, 1.75, I always felt very comfortable when I used natural vitamin E. But yeah, he was good to work with.
Yeah, the vitamin expert in my mind and trace mineral gentleman. Speaking of trace minerals, you also have a copper product for antimine that you're working with.
Yeah, it's a product called CoRouge. It's actually a monovalent copper oxide. And, people think of copper oxide, they typically thinking of copper 2 oxide. And this is actually the reduced form, monovalent. So, and the funny thing is it's not funny, but the difference is copper oxide is black in color, where CoRouge is red. It's almost blood red. And then, of course, copper sulfate's kind of that bluish green color. So the neat thing is every one of them are different colors. But based on a lot of the data that's been done internally at Antimine, we're in the process of wrapping a study up right now with nursery pigs. But all the data that's been out looks like you can get equivalent response with about 100 parts per million copper from monovalent copper oxide, as you can 150 TBCC or 200 to 250 copper sulfate. That's not to say the other two don't work. They all work. And I would say they all work pretty equal with respect to feed conversion response. The question is if you start looking at the efficiency of that 3 to 5 points of feed conversion that you can pick up, 100 parts per million copper is it's a smaller footprint. And the other thing I always liked about it is just the space it takes in a diet. And I actually gave a presentation at DPP here 2 weeks ago, and that was actually 2 or 3 of my slides was just flipping up slides from my Concept 5 of what each one of these ingredients looked like in a diet. Because while some in there were probably production nutritionists or nutritionists that actually formulated diet, a lot of them are probably more biochemists and really didn't know. And basically, what I was showing was if you put copper sulfate in, it's about a 2-pound inclusion in a diet. And the reason I went to TBCC a long time ago when I was at Smithfield was, one, I could put 150 parts per million copper and get the same response as I could with 200 to 250, but it also saved me 1.5 pounds of space. And then, how much is that space worth? Depends on what you fill it with. Well, same thing with the CoRouge product. Started using it in the nurseries because the data showed I could get the same response with 100 parts per million, and it saved me another 1/4 pound. So, basically I go from 2-pound inclusion product down to a 1/2 pound inclusion product, which is TBCC, to a 1/4 pound and get the same response. And then now you're getting down to a size where you can actually put that in your premix.
Exactly.
And I don't have to have that extra ingredient in the mill. So that was some of the points I was trying to make in this that, probably are not thought of in a basic research or setting is, I could take that ingredient out of the feed mill. So that's got a value and there's a less chance for a mess up. That's like phytase. I put phytase in premixes just because it's just another ingredient to get out of the mill, because it doesn't matter how big the mill is, you never have enough microbins.
Never enough.
Never enough microbins. But no, the copper oxide, monovalent copper oxide product has been, a good product. And what we've seen in just in our field type studies is I've told people in late nurseries, to me it's performed every time just like any other copper source would be at that 100 parts per million level. The debate becomes once you get into the grow finish side. Do you go all the way? Do you go to 150 pounds? Do you not feed any? And then that's where that has to end up being. I was talking with a nutritionist earlier today about it. I said that really becomes a question on, where you're at with your fat levels in your diet and what kind of heat stress you're going to have, these type of things to whether or not in his situation, I was like thinking about 150 pounds would be about the maximum you would get any benefit out of it from a growth standpoint. But the nice thing about, well, when I used to feed pigs on the East Coast, we actually got a response from copper all the way through, partly because as you feed an elevated level of copper, the body is going to, well, I always like to say these metals are all chaperoned around the body to keep from misbehaving. And
Fred Madison, right?
yes, yep. And that's part of the line. And I never shy away from saying I learned from Fred, but they're basically all chaperoned around, and then anything extra is excreted via the bile. So if you're feeding higher levels of fat, you can actually get an improvement, and I think you actually pick up a little feed conversion, and in those times. But that's. Yeah, and like I said, you feed it out in the Midwest. I think that's one where you just have to do your own trials and see if it's worth looking at it all the way from, say, over 150 pounds on, and it's just going to depend. But far as in the nurseries, I tell folks, I said I don't even blink. It works there, and then in the finishing, I think it really kind of depends on, especially if you're under heat stress yet, it's going to work. At 100 versus the 150, because a lot of people, will use TBCC actually further out in finishing than I thought they would. And I think it's caught on more because of shortness of space or whatever, just trying to keep pushing average daily gain. Because that was one of the big things we ran into is we just, even though feed conversion was important, once we got into the summer, gain became important. And but yeah, that's that product, and it's called CoRouge by Anamine.
And the nice thing is you can feed less, which means we're going to have less in the soil,
Yes.
which is a benefit as well.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's my only challenge of recommending feeding copper all the way through the finisher, especially if you use a sulfate, is that, corn can't pull copper out of the soil like it can pull zinc. So
Right.
It's a balancing act as well from an environmental perspective.
Yeah, and that's that's where people have to decide what works best in their system and all. But far as does it work as good as? Yes, But here again, is it enough? Is it enough to feed it all the way through? I think that becomes an individual decision, and whether or not you're the Midwest and the Southeast are different. In the Southeast, we got more lagoons, and of course everything settles and they spread. But eventually, one day you got to do something with it.
You got to clean it out one day. Yeah.
And but with the pits you have in the Midwest where they actually inject, might be more of a consideration.
Well, thank you very much, Tommy. It was good to catch up with you again.
Yeah, same here.
Pork.
Thank you.
We're here live at World Pork Expo with a veterinarian. I'm a nutritionist. We were just talking about this, the line in the sand. So I'm going to try to ask some intelligent questions for veterinarian, Dr. Megan Bollin. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be here.
Megan, can you introduce us to Norbrook and your role and kind of your background in the swine industry?
Absolutely. So Norbrook is a family-owned company based out of Northern Ireland, and we manufacture lots of sterile injectables and pour-ons and both companion animal and food animal products, but export to over 120 countries globally, and the company has been in business for a long time, since like 1980 something. So it's a well-known, respected brand. We make all kinds of products for food animals and swine specifically as well. And so today I think we're just going to talk about one of those injectable antibiotics. My role, actually, I should talk about that. I am one of the technical services veterinarians for Norbrook, focused on food animal and swine specifically. We have a team of 5 veterinarians and also a sales team and all the other departments as well. So.
And no need for a nutritionist.
No, not yet at least.
Not
but
yet,
if
right?
we do. I know one.
Well, we're going to talk about a product that is very similar to Cefenil, but I heard it's actually better, Cefenil, with you. So kind of talk about how we use Cefenil and why it's better.
Well, I'll get to that. Okay, so a little background. We all know PRRS, right?
Yeah.
PRRS virus is kind of the bane of our existence for the past almost 40 years, right? And it's usually followed kind of a seasonal pattern in terms of the cold winter months. It kind of rears its head and then it'll go down in the summertime. But in the last several years, that's really changed a lot and it's more prevalent year round. Like you can find a farm all the time that's positive for PRRS. So it's a virus that mutates, just like influenza virus. It likes to mutate. It likes to evade our immune system and our biosecurity measures and find different ways to hide out and stuff. And so we've got to become smarter than that virus. The other thing with viruses is that they usually come with a secondary bacterial co-infection. So they kind of set up shop and then you've got these secondary bacteria that come in and really cause a lot more problems. And it's like I was telling someone yesterday, it's like a co-infection isn't just 1 + 1 = 2. It's like 1 + 1 = 10 sometimes when it comes to the financial impact. And so how that is important to Norbrook and where we come into play is that we have a portfolio of antibiotics, injectable antibiotics, that are labeled for treatment and control of bacterial swine respiratory disease pathogens. So for Cefenil specifically, it's labeled for 4 of our common bacterial co-infections, APP, Actin bacillus pneumoniae, Pasteurella multocida, Salmonella, and Streptococcus suis. So I know a lot of producers are familiar with those terms. So the point is, when we have a PRRS outbreak, there are certain things we can do to control the secondary co-infections.
Or third or fourth.
Tertiary or whatever.
Yeah.
Co-infections. And there's in-feed antibiotics, there's water antibiotics, and then there's our injectable antibiotics. And so that's where we come into play is it's an individual animal treatment. It's an sterile injectable. It is a bioequivalent to XNL-RTU, like you were talking about. So it's actually the first and only generic ceftiofur available for livestock on the market. And so we actually have internal studies comparing syringeability between the Pioneer product and our bioequivalent product, and ours actually showed to be superior in terms of being more syringeable, which obviously is good for the producers and the caretakers in the farm.
Yeah. And the people who have carpal tunnel now because of all the shots and processing I've done in my life.
That's right. Anything we can do to make it a little bit more user friendly. So another benefit of Cefenil is that when we talk about like marketing our cull sows or our market animals, it's only got a 4-day meat withdrawal time. So
That's big.
it's very convenient.
Yeah.
Yep. In terms of having that flexibility and not worrying about, I need to put her on a truck or, market this barn animal. So short meat withdrawal time, it is a multi-day treatment. So whereas some of our injectable antibiotics are a single treatment, Cefenil is actually a multi-day treatment, which is, you would think is a downfall, but it's actually beneficial because it allows those caretakers to look at that animal for today, tomorrow, the next day, and actually monitor that response to treatment and make sure she's actually making progress.
So let's go into some basics for potentially producers or technicians watching this. What is a good percentage of pigs in your mind? So we got a PRRS positive herd, let's use strep as an example.
Mm-hmm.
What is the percentage of pigs that should get an injectable treatment in that situation?
Well, it's not an easy answer.
Well, yeah.
There's a lot of things. Right. It depends, and it depends on your resources that you have. So your labor, that's probably going to be the biggest factor. The finances that you have is going to help you decide, do you want to go in the water or do you want to do a mass med with an injectable? And so a veterinarian takes that into account. They base a lot of their decision on the history of that flow and what pathogens they know are going to rear their head at specific time points. And so if they know it's going to spread to that entire barn and they need to get on it quick, they'll probably use a water one because it's going to get in there and you want to keep them drinking. And so you want to get that in there quick. If it's something that may be a little bit more slower spreading, you could go in and you could treat a whole pin, for example, with an injectable, and then you could come back later with a water medication if you needed to. But there's some cases where you would want to go in and you would want to treat an entire barn injectably, and I've done that before too, and it's not necessarily fun, but
Nope. But necessary.
sometimes it's necessary, but there's just a lot of things, and that's where I always refer producers back to their vet, is that they're going to be able to make that best decision for that specific case, depending on the susceptibility of that pathogen to specific antibiotics, because we know there's a lot of resistance happening out there too. And so if we can target that treatment to be the most successful outcome possible, that's what we're going to do.
And the other thing I find when I audit different things is the same pig getting treated multiple times. Where do you kind of draw that line of that, next day treatment? How many days do you give that pig to say it's not worth that injectable? And we have PQA standards here in the US that says about 3 days, I think, if I remember right. Should know, trainer, but
Right.
About 3 days to say, well, then I need to euthanize that pig.
Yep.
How do you determine making that decision with Cefenil on continuous treatment?
That's a good question. And Cefenil specifically wouldn't necessarily be used for those younger, like nursery pigs. I would probably choose a different treatment for them. But if we're talking about more of our grower to finisher or sows and adult animals, Cefenil would be a good choice for those, just because of the dosing on that. But back to your question. So when we think about animal welfare, is this animal going to respond to treatment? Do we have the right treatment that we're giving it? And if not, we need to monitor that quickly and maybe switch antibiotics if we've chosen the wrong one. And so that's where it kind of what class of antibiotic and the antibiotic susceptibility of that specific pathogen. If we can get diagnostics on that animal, that'll be the most helpful thing. That's a swine vet is always going to want diagnostics on something so that we know exactly what we're facing and what we need to put in there to fix that problem. And so ideally we pick the correct antibiotic to start with, and that pig responds to treatment, and we can move it out of the sick pen back with the rest of them. It gets back on feed and water and it grows. If we don't see that happen, maybe we've missed something. Maybe there's a lameness issue that we haven't, maybe we haven't assessed the full picture. So really getting your eyes on those animals in that pen, getting in the barn and looking at what's happening. Maybe it's an air quality thing. Maybe it's an environmental thing. Maybe it's not a pathogen that's causing these problems. And so that's why I said it depends. There's lots of different factors that go into it, and you know that. But yeah, animal welfare is always our number one goal. And so if that animal's not responding to treatment in a timely manner, we need to do the right thing and put that animal out of its misery, right? So, yeah.
Well, obviously we've talked about in-feed additives, water additives on medications, and that price tag can keep going up.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things Norbrook talks about with your product is the affordability of using this. And can you kind of talk about, I guess, a baseline cost of using Cefenil over some other options in feed, water, or other injectables?
Yeah, so that's one of the, for any of the bioequivalent companies out there that have products, that's really one of the benefits of having them is that, usually the price point can be lower than the Pioneer offers. And so it's going to depend. Your price point's going to depend based on your distributor that you go through or whatever it may be. So I can't necessarily speak to that, but it's going to be lower than your Pioneer in general. And so that's good because it helps those producers stretch their treatment budget, whatever that, because it gets down to the penny, right? Mm-hmm. How many cents is it going to cost to treat these animals? And so just know that in general, a bioequivalent product is going to stretch your treatment budget further. It's going to be just as safe, just as effective, because we have the same exact standards when we get these products approved by the FDA.
Well, since we talked about PRRS has been a pain in my butt all my career. Do we have any hope of mitigating this, or will it? Well, obviously with PIC and the PRRS resistant pig, I'm just saying that's good news, but there's other stuff that's going to rear its head. I don't think
I can see both sides of the story here because I know that PIC's been working on this for a long time. It hasn't happened overnight, and they've gotten FDA approval for this PRRS resistant pig, which I think is great. I think it's still to be determined what the widespread acceptance and uptake of it is going to be. And I think we'll see a lot of that in the next few years. How quickly is this going to ramp up and it all? I think it's a great way to fight PRRS because everything we've done so far, it's found a way around it, basically. Antibiotics don't treat PRRS, they treat the secondary infections. Vaccines can help prevent the severity of the disease. They don't prevent the disease to start with. They can help stabilize a herd and help you recover quicker. But even then, this virus has evaded everything and it's lasting longer, it's harder to eliminate, and we see a lot more depop repops anymore because the severity of some of these PRRS strains are just, they're too much to deal with. So I have hope for the genetics side because we haven't tried that aspect yet, but I do think it'll take a while for it to be widely accepted if it is at all.
Yeah, and like I said, I've lived through pseudorabies. We call it APP now.
Yep.
I've lived through that and some, really bad stuff.
Yeah.
I've drug out a lot of dead pigs.
Yes.
And what my concern is if we do eliminate it, what else are we
Right,
gonna have?
and that was my other concern is that if it's not PRRS, what else will it be? Because we know, like with the New World screwworm coming back in cattle,
Yeah.
right? That's in Mexico right now.
In
It's only-
Texas, they're talking about Texas and
Yes.
New Mexico shutting the border down, which
And
is
that doesn't
scary.
affect just cattle. It can affect humans. It can affect anyone. So there's always another disease knocking on the door. So behind PRRS, there will be something else. It's just a matter of what and when.
Well, we can use disease as an example, and I always like to get this point of view. ASF was such a hot topic 4 or 5 years ago, right? We've been able to keep that out. But why can't we stop first, you think?
It's a good question. I don't have the answer for that. It's just it's been around since the 80s when it was known as mystery swine disease, and it just continues to change itself and mutate, and that's why I think the genetically resistant pigs may be the answer, but at the same time, you just worry about what may tag along with that, with those genetics that we don't know about yet.
Yeah.
And
I've talked to an MD science researcher that's really, he is diving into what we used to call the junk DNA. And he calls it ancestral DNA.
Yeah.
It was from viruses originally. And so he's got me thinking, like, if we turn that off, what will we turn on?
Like, are there linked genes somehow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, I haven't had a chance to talk to PIC in depth on it, but I'm excited for biotechnology. It's just, I think it's the consumer.
I think that's the wild card. Yeah. Well, and that's the packers' concerns too now, because they are the ones that are going to have to say, yes, we will take these pigs from you, or no, we won't.
And we
that's
already know about the
consumer
immunocastration issues in the U.S. and not wanting to go that route either.
Yeah, we've seen this before with other technologies, and it really just comes down to the consumer and really the consumer outreach and education and letting them know that this is safe pork, right? It's not going to cause any problems. It's going to taste the same. The animals are still treated the same way, like caretakers still take care of them. I think the consumer and the consumer education, which the Pork Board and NPPC are working on, and PIC I know probably has some messaging too as well, but the consumer is really going to drive, I think, the speed of the uptake that we see with this genetically resistant pig.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to meet you and good to be here.
I'm so happy to finish my World Pork Expo with you.
Thank you.
It's been a long time since we've got to talk again.
I know. It's a long time. We've known each other for quite a while.
Yeah, and you're not even in the U.S. anymore.
No, I know. It's
I know.
the wonders of remote work.
Exactly. So we're obviously here for your launch of Feed Armor. Can you introduce the thought process behind Feed Armor and how it came about into the market?
Yeah, so feed mitigation is obviously a very big piece, and we've been looking to develop a feed mitigant that would be as effective as the gold standard, which is formaldehyde, but at the same price point or less. And when that first was asked of me as a researcher, I thought that they were crazy, because formaldehyde has a very long track record. But we used an existing research program on some other products and combined it with some more development, and we were able to develop Feed Armor. And here back over the winter, we're able to prove that it could actually be equal to formaldehyde.
So kind of explain the research you've done to get this to be equal, if not better, than formaldehyde.
Yeah, so I would definitely say that the way we designed the research, we can say that it's equal. So Dr. Scott D developed the ice cube challenge model and conducted this in 5 BCL2 rooms. And we had a negative control. We had a positive control, which was 6.5 pounds per ton of formaldehyde. And then 2, 4, and 6 pounds per ton of feed armor. And then Scott did the regular ice cube challenge. And we actually, we were using sows instead of growing pigs like the early Big Mig trials. And we tracked these sows for 27 days. And over those 27 days, we saw clear clinical disease of PDV Person Seneca in the sows that were in the non-mitigated feed. But in all of the mitigated feed, we had no disease whatsoever. And from that, we were able to look at both the overall picture as well as the recovery of virus in the saliva, that 2 pounds per ton of feed armor is really equivalent to using formaldehyde. And that was Dr. D's conclusion.
Well, I was going to say there's some advantages of not using formaldehyde and going with a product like Feed Armor. What are some of those advantages?
Yeah, I think the Feed Armor has some handling restrictions. There are some potential safety concerns. I know that's different people have different opinions on this. But as we look at NFPA ratings and safety and those types of things, Feed Armor is a very, very large difference in formaldehyde in terms of handling risk for our people in our mills, as well as equipment, those types of things.
Well, when we look at the core ingredients behind feed mitigation from more of an acidification approach, we're getting more than just disease control. We're actually probably getting sub-performance value as well.
Yeah, Casey, that's very important, is that we have to look at the bigger picture of mitigants. For the exact reason that you mentioned, I presented a paper at ASV this year, which looked at feed armor and the impact it's had on prolapses in some cases. We didn't expect that. That was not what we were looking for at all. But we switched the customer from another mitigant to feed armor, and we saw a drop in prolapses.
Wow.
But the biggest thing really is where we see the most nutritional value of feed armor is, number one, it's only 2 pounds per ton. So that reduces the
6.5 pound difference.
energy dilution of the diet. Yeah. And that has some value, especially in diets when we're formulating to an energy level. But then secondly, feed armor has actually been proven to improve feed intake, where many other organic acid products, actually some of them can show negative feed intake.
Do you see this going on past sows because you're getting a performance boost from the different acids, and then also being able to save on tonnage and like finishing things and things and zones?
We at this point in time, we're really targeting feed armor for feed mitigation. Mm-hmm. So that would be lactation, gestation, yield developers, nursery pigs that are on the sow farm, and we're really focusing to that area with feed armor.
Well, great. Well, thank you. And if people want to learn more about Feed Armor that aren't here at World Pork, because obviously everybody's leaving, how do they reach out to you?
Yeah, they can reach out to us through feedarmor.com or through mcness.com. And and I guess I didn't mention, but it's helpful to mention that Feed Armor at 2 pounds per ton, it's only less than $5 a ton of treated feed. So it's $4.70 a treated ton of feed. Which is a very, very, very viable option that way. I forgot to mention that, but I wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
Well, thank you so much, Frederick.
Yeah, thank you so much.